again. And okay, oh, it's already started. Okay. All right. Are we on?
Yes, we are on. Okay, hello everyone. This is Dr. Kathryn Chu. She is a professor of classics and religious studies at Cal State University, Long Beach, where she teaches ancient languages, literatures, myth, and religious studies intro to theory. She publishes on the ancient novels, early Christian female martyr accounts, 5th century Roman history, and myth. Welcome, Dr. Chu. We're so excited to hear from you.
Yay, thank you very much. So what I'm talking about today, I thought I would pick because, what better thing should you talk about on a Friday night but blood-sucking monsters? So I guess some of the takeaways I hope people get from this is how enduring some of the ideas are and how asking interesting questions can lead to new and unexpected knowledge. So let's get started. So I got into this because I don't normally publish on blood-sucking monsters because I was invited to, oh dear, let's see, there we go. I was invited to a conference in Romania on Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler, otherwise known as Count Dracula. And as the only classicist at the conference, I thought, well, I better, give the ancient perspective. And so I was thinking about monsters and what we could say about them and what we know about them from the ancient world. So, but that, by the way, is Castle Bran Castle, the castle that Bram Stoker said was Dracula's castle. And I think he spent maybe 1 or 2 nights there. That really wasn't his castle. We wanted to go to Poinari Castle, but it was apparently inundated by bears and closed at the moment. So I'll have to go back to Romania. So at any rate, monsters. So monsters in Greek mythology. So looking at all these monsters here that I have gathered, if you look at them carefully, you might notice some things. For instance, on the left side of the screen, there are some male monsters, and on the right side of the screen, there are female monsters. And when I teach mythology, one of the things I point out to my students is that male monsters tend to have multiple body parts, and female monsters tend to be multi-species. And that implies that male monsters are scary because they are very strong and powerful, whereas female monsters are scary because they're tricky and deceptive. So where does that get us? Well, a culture's monsters tell a lot about that culture. So this brings us into male monsters versus female monsters, the idea of gender in the ancient world. And the Greeks and Romans had a very, very binary definition of gender, unlike today. So this is very interesting. So the Greeks associated men with the best qualities, right? The males have strength, they have reason, they have self-control, they have courage. And the Romans thought the Greeks went better. And their word for virtue, virtus, actually means the quality of being a man, which implies that women can't be virtuous. And Anne Carson, the scholar, she kind of sums all of these differences up in her analysis, which I've actually depicted graphically on the screen, where males in ancient Greek poetry, but actually in a quite broader perspective, can be seen as hot, dry, and solid, characterized by that. And females are characterized by being cold, wet, and porous. So it's worth teasing out what these things are actually implying. It's implying that males bear the characteristics of life, right? And these 3 adjectives connote stability and strength. Whereas women or females, right, there's something wrong here. And the wrong thing we're going to be seeing is that women menstruate, they leak. And so this suggests that they're unstable and that they need something dry, warm, and solid in order to survive. So which is kind of quite funny, and it's no coincidence that the cures for women in the ancient world who were ailing were always marriage and childbirth. So, okay, so thinking about it this way, then we turn to the idea of, hello?
You guys should watch Jeopardy.
Turning to the idea of blood-sucking monsters. So what do we know about them? And I guess if there were an audience, I would ask you all, what blood-sucking monsters do you know of in the ancient world? So let me tell you, these are the most well-known ones: Mormo and Pusa, Strix, and Lamia. So this is sort of interesting because whereas Vlad, Dracula, is a male monster, all of these blood-sucking Greco-Roman monsters are female. And what's more, there's something quite interesting about them. They tend to fall into one of two categories. Either they prey on young men and seduce them and suck their blood, like Lamia is doing there on the right side of the screen, or they prey on children and babies and like to eat them. And so Strix, the witch, there is an example of that. And also going back to what I was saying about the distinction between male and female monsters, all these monsters are multiform. So Lamia can appear variously as an old woman. Sometimes she has male sex organs, and sometimes she's a beautiful woman with serpentine characteristics, like as in the Waterhouse painting. Mormo's forms include looking like a wolf or a horse, a creature with big ears and 4 legs, or she can also be a beautiful woman. It's kind of funny because all I could find for these monsters was fan art, really. And I think there are no ancient depictions of them because they're actually scarier when you see them in your imagination. In Pusa, whose name actually kind of means one leg, she shapeshifts between an ox, a mule, a beautiful woman, and she is supposed to have had only one leg, either of bronze or of dung. So there you have it. And striges, the plural of strix, they were sort of witches that turned into birds of prey and preyed on people. So, okay, so the traditional interpretation of these monsters. Hello? The traditional interpretation of these monsters has been that they were somehow inversions of female societal roles, right? So that that they were representing either marginalized women, or in that they were criticizing women who could no longer participate in society, like women who could no longer bear children, postmenopausal women, older women. And that these representations also refer to the fact that women are only valuable for their ability to bear children. For instance, some of these creatures, like Morma, was supposed to have been a woman once, and she killed her children and flew away, and then she spends the rest of her time going and stealing other people's children. So this interpretation I thought was interesting, but I thought there was more that we could say about these monsters. And so I tried to come at it from a different perspective, and I asked the question, what did the ancient Greek and Romans actually believe about blood? And how did their thoughts on blood inform perhaps what these monsters are? So let's take a look at that. Found some interesting things. All right, so Hippocrates is the father of modern medicine, Western medicine. And he's not the first, he didn't originate the 4 humors, but he's the first writer we have who talks about them. And so they're supposed to be like these 4 fluids that are in the body, and in all of our bodies, we're supposed to have a balance of them. And when we get out of balance, then we get sick. And it's kind of cool because you can see how as in my chart, there's a nice little diagram. They progress through all the different ages, the seasons of the year, and then temperature and moistness or dryness and stuff like that. If you're wondering what is yellow bile, what is black bile, we don't know. It's supposed to be some effluents from the liver or the spleen, but yeah. So, but at any rate, he made up this chart, and it looks really persuasive. So Hippocrates wasn't really reductive with when he talked about women, but he does say some interesting things about women. He mentions that there is a single origin of female ailments, right? That women had a flaw in anatomical design. Maybe somebody needs to mute themselves. And so he traced the origin of this anatomical flaw in anatomical design to the fact that menstrual blood does not drain properly in pubescent virgins. And he even suggests in a different document that women perhaps have a surplus of blood and need menstruation because their flesh is porous and they need some way to get rid of it. So this is what Hippocrates says. And it's interesting that he sets the stage for all the other ancient medical writers in thinking about these things. And notice too that blood is associated with infancy and springtime, like all the best times of the year. Okay, after Hippocrates, we have Plato, and I've put up some things that Plato said about blood in his dialogue, the Timaeus. So Plato talks about blood being an internal fountain of fire, and how every animal's innermost parts are hottest around its blood and veins. And he talks about how important blood is for everything, how it breaks down the food and carries the food all around the body and nourishes it, and how the blood even plays a role in our sense perception, like how when you hear something, it goes into your ears and into your blood, then circulates around and then somehow gets to your soul. So yeah, so he he thought that blood was really, really important. And this is interesting too, because Hippocrates thought that people were hottest when they were children, and that they gradually cooled down over time. And our former President Trump had espoused a similar idea with his like battery idea of human beings, that human beings have a certain amount of energy. Once they spend that energy, they die, right? So these ideas are remarkably enduring. So yes, so Plato talks about blood, and he has some interesting things to say when it comes to the sexes. So he says that men and women are driven to want to have sex by an animate being, a zoon emsukon, and that's like an animal in their genitals. Now, for men, he says it's like an animal, but for women, he says it is an animal, and that's a distinction that should be noted. And so Plato hypothesizes that when this desire for procreation is unfulfilled, only in women become ill, and men don't become ill, but women do. And this illness arises because their wombs become dislodged from their proper place in the body and wander around in frustration, creating all sorts of obstructions and things like that. And only when the woman is married and has sex and starts having children does she recover. So Plato attributes female malaise to an unfulfilled need for reproduction. Aristotle, oh my gosh, he is so much fun. So Aristotle further develops ideas on blood by theorizing that semen, they knew about semen in the ancient world, that semen is produced by cooking the blood. That is, that men produce semen because their internal body heat can heat their blood up to such a degree that it produces semen. So what about women? Well, he says that women can't do that women cannot heat their bodies up hot enough. And so their failed the failed byproduct of this is discharged monthly as menstruation. So you see where he's going with this. He believes that only men have anything to do with reproduction, that the male provides the soul and the female only the matter of an embryo. And it's this way, he has a weird idea that women must have pleasure in sex in order to conceive. And seems like an odd idea, but the former congressman from Missouri, he actually adopted this idea in his theory about, what was it, legitimate rape. That's right. So if women get pregnant from being raped, well, obviously they must have enjoyed it, so it wasn't rape. And it's just a crazy, crazy idea, but goes back to Aristotle. So Aristotle continues this idea of hot and cold by saying the sex of an embryo is determined by its ability to cook, that is, heat up the food with his body. And if it can't get it hot enough, then it turns into a female. So again, you have this assumption that the male embryos start out male, and the ones that are defective turn into females. So yes, so after Aristotle, there are a bunch of other medical writers, Soranus, Galen. They don't really forward the knowledge or the ideas, I should say, about blood. But then we come to Pliny the Elder, this Roman, and he wrote natural history, which is like an Encyclopedia Britannica, if you know what that is. So multi-volume, compiling all that was known in the ancient world. And my favorite part of Pliny is his books on folk cures. Really fun reading. So he talks about folk cures for all sorts of ailments. And so the underlying principle in all of these cures is that the intrinsic nature of any given creature is contained in its body parts. So if a sick person properly identifies their deficiency and consumes the appropriate body part of a thing, they'll be cured, because consuming a piece of a thing is like consuming the vitality of the thing itself. So for instance, to cure gout, you take the affected swollen leg and you wrap it up with the first cuttings of children, the first hair cuttings of children, because gout is an old person's disease, and the youthfulness of the hair kind of counteracts the oldness, right? And kind of makes sense. My favorite folk cure from Pliny is the cure for flatulent cows, because we all have that problem. No, flatulent cows. I mean, I know about dog farts, but I really don't know about cow farts. They must be very terrible. Pliny's cure for that is to put human bones in the horns of cows. And after doing a bit of poking around, I think I figured out his logic for that. These are not cures actually that Pliny made up. He's just recording them, right? He went around and researched them. So Hippocrates says that flatulence is stopped by solid objects because they absorb its violence and stop it from working. So I think the logic here is that the human bones put into the cow's horns somehow counteract the violence of cow flatulence. So there you have it. Okay, so among all these folk cures that Pliny goes through, he mentions blood cures, and he cautions people to beware of blood cures, especially animal blood, because it's very powerful and corrosive. But even worse than animal blood is menstrual blood. It's very, very dangerous. And some of the things he talks about, let's see, what can menstrual blood do? Oh, yes. It has power over the weather, over vermin, over plants and inanimate objects, and even over humans. So menstrual blood can drive away hailstorms and whirlwinds. During an eclipse, it can harm someone or bring death if you're having sex. A menstruating woman walking naked through a field brings down all the vermin, but if it's done at dawn, it can harm the crops. Menstrual blood can dim mirrors. It can heal the sores of draft animals, and maybe even cure headaches if used with rose oil. So it's kind of quite bizarre. There is one instance of human blood used for a cure, Pliny mentions, although quite distastefully, and that's to cure epilepsy, which was thought of as the sacred disease in the ancient world, even though Hippocrates wrote an entire book saying it's not. I mean, there's nothing inherently more sacred about epilepsy than any other disease. You can explain it, you can cure it, and all that. But at any rate, it was the disease to find an answer for, like cancer is today. So Pliny mentions that the blood of gladiators should be drunk by epileptics to cure their epilepsy. The idea being that gladiators are very strong and powerful, and that strength and power is contained in their blood. And so if epileptics drink that, then that will somehow counteract the weakness of their disease. And so notice here that male blood is powerful and curative, whereas female blood, right, it will destroy things. So that's quite interesting. Okay, so Ledkias. Now, if I had an audience, I would ask, can any of you think about recall a use of blood in Greek myth? And I have a little slide here with a clue. And so I'll tell you what it is. It's Odysseus in the underworld. And if you look carefully, you can see he's got some sheep at his feet. He's just slaughtered them. And he goes to the underworld and he sacrifices a sheep and makes a big pot of blood. And then all the ghosts come and they drink the blood. And when they drink the blood, then they're able to regain their memories of their former lives, and it restores their perceptions, and so they can talk to Odysseus about their lives. So this is interesting here, and so there's this tacit notion that raw blood is almost too powerful to use by itself, and only in very, very, very rare cases can you use it, like bringing back the dead. But you should avoid that. And there's another reason why the Greeks avoided human blood in things, because of course there was an ancient taboo on cannibalism. And this cute little comic here reminds us about the story of Atreus and Thyestes, how Atreus fed his brother's children to him when they got into dispute. And Greek mythology is full of, not full, but it's got a number of cannibalistic stories, like Procnutarius and Philomela and Lycaon, all people who have bad ends because they participate in cannibalism. So even though we have archaeological evidence that of actual human sacrifice in early Greece, but in general, cannibalism was only practiced by barbarians and brutes. Okay, so where does that get us with blood-sucking monsters? So you can kind of see where I'm going, with hopefully with these ancient medical writers, right? So up to this point, these monsters have been seen as inversions of female societal roles. So not representing all women, but just women who are barren, or who no longer are able to bear children, or women who are old. But I think that that can lead to dismissing these monsters as symbols of women's frustration and anxiety that they lose their fertility much earlier than men do, which is unfortunate, but also true. But if you take a look through the medical writers, I think this shows how from the very beginning, these medical writers conceived of and imagined females as inferior to males and manipulated the evidence to justify their opinions. So these female monsters are not products of sad science, but of bad science. Let's take a look. So here are here's a recapitulation of some of the faulty assumptions of these ancient medical writers. That blood is a source of heat and vitality. And so all of their other assumptions start here. And so we can remind ourselves once again that Hippocrates is 4 humors, right? Heat and vitality. Blood is the humor that's associated with infancy and spring, moistness and warmness and happiness. And then, so we also saw the supposed inherent design flaw of women, how they couldn't drain their blood properly. And the solutions always involved sexual intercourse and reproduction. And that failure to do that would result in female illness. And then also the idea that men use their body heat to cook their blood into semen, and that women could not do so. And every month discharged their failed attempts as menstruation. So yes, blood is a very powerful substance. As the essence of vitality, it either restores life or destroys it. So if we think about these female monsters, then we can see how the medical writers set up this paradigm as the male being the opposite of the female, males being the standard and females being the deviation, right? And that results in seeing males as healthy and the norm, the natural norm, and women as ailing and unnaturally deviant. So the healthy natural norm is a warm man who cooks his blood into semen, and the ailing unnatural deviant is a cold woman who cannot utilize her blood as a man does. So if we think about it, how would the medical writers figure out the cure? Well, the cure along Pliny's line of Pliny's researches would involve infusions for women of the very thing that they are lacking, the hot living blood of males. So, and sexual intercourse naturally provides something even better than this, the actual product of cooked male blood, that is semen. So underlying this conclusion is the unspoken understanding about what women really want, right? That women really want to be whole. They want to be normal. They want to be healthy. And to accomplish this, they need men's blood. So what I've realized from reading these medical writers is that Mormo, Lamia, and Pusa, Strix, and their sisters, they're not distortions of reality. They're not just representations of old or barren women. They are all women. Women, by their very definition, the medical writers, are monsters. And they're these cold, sterile creatures who crave blood and its products. And as being female monsters, they must be multiform, right? And so some of these use their beautiful forms to seduce young men who have the hottest semen, as well as hot blood. But given the complicated delivery mode for semen, other monsters opt to target the very hottest blood, the blood of babies. So thinking along these lines, perhaps this taboo on cannibalism was devised in part to protect men from women. So lastly, did the ancients really believe that women had no role in procreation, right? Was it all the agricultural model, or what came before that? And I think that the agricultural model is that the man plants the seed and the woman holds it and it grows up, kind of like planting tomato plants or something. So the way that the medical writers conceptualize these women, right, these female monsters, they are striving to compensate for the shortcomings of their nature, right? They yearn for men's warm blood and hot semen, and they seduce young men. They yearn for the power to engender life as men do, but in their impotence, they can only steal what they desire most. But there's a more enlightened perspective, and I think these other slides hint at it. This is from Chateau Hayuk in Anatolia in Turkey, and these are very, very old Stone Age carvings that appear to refer to a mother goddess cult that predates the patriarchal pantheons that came to replace it. So from a more enlightened perspective, female monsters, I think really these female monsters contest accepted wisdom. The wisdom that the male is the one who creates life and that the female provides nothing more than a vessel in which the offspring can grow. And perhaps these female monsters remember what was forgotten once the Olympian cult came to Greece, that women do contribute intrinsically to procreation. And that's perhaps why the male medical writers have to argue their points so repetitively and loudly in order to justify their advantage. Perhaps these female monsters whispered the truth that no Greek man wanted to hear, that women were at the heart of procreation, and that they were trying to reclaim for their gender this knowledge that had been buried in the ground in dark places, but would haunt the dreams of men at night. Give it back to me. Give me back what is mine. And here are just a couple of my references. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chu. We have about 20 or 30 people on the line right now.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know.
Yes, we had some people popping in as we continued. If you are up for questions that anyone might have, I think some people could put their questions.
Sure, yeah.
Or
Medusa's blood, oh yes, for sure, for sure. Yes, trees in the Aeneid. What would you do with that? That's an interesting idea. Any other questions?
Yeah, Alexis.
What started like this kind of like obsession with blood for the medical writers? Like what caused them to like even start thinking about it like this?
Well, I don't think it's an obsession. I think they were just curious. Like what I did is I went through all of them and culled everything that they wrote about blood. And so, they wrote about tons of other things as well. But I think, blood is important for them because they saw that they thought it was the basis of life. And if you look more at Plato, he talks about how blood basically is the basic building block of bodies. So, yeah, and why did they come to that? Well, I guess it's understandable how they could see that that blood was so important. But I think it's interesting that they also project onto it their assumptions that men are better than women, right? And so it's like, okay, well, blood is important for all life, but male blood is better than female blood. And let's just imagine how that is so. So it's I think that I think is interesting, and they do that with other things too, in their writings, not just blood.
I have a
Thank
question.
you. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just a little curious about this, but so when Roman women were on their periods, and I can kind of see the viewpoint, understand that it's like, oh, they're bleeding, so they must be like weaker, but I mean, like, were they shunned? Like, they're not allowed to do anything, or?
No, it's not like other cultures. No, but so like women in the ancient world, for instance, in ancient Greece and Rome, when people died, right, women would take care of the bodies. Why? Because they were closer to pollution than men were, right? Because they bled all the time, and so they were the ones who would dress bodies for burial. So I think it's that sort of thing. It's not like, for instance, in ancient Jewish culture, when women take baths and things, they have to live separately from their society. Although we do know that men and women tended to live separately, within the houses, or have different rooms allocated to them. But yeah, that's an interesting question. But as for the day-to-day life, I would say I don't know that we actually know, right? I mean, we don't have the writings of ancient women saying, oh, this happened to me or that happened to me. And I think that's one of the problems, because all the writings we have, or most of them, right, are from male writers. And so it's whatever they thought was interesting. And would they think that women's private lives were interesting? Probably not. Not. So I think that's why that's one of the problems. And we don't have enough evidence. And it may be true, but we don't know.
And did this kind of like thought and like influence the Vestal Virgins, like the idea of them?
Oh yes, absolutely, for sure. Oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I mean, they had to stay pure, right? And their purity was sort of symbolic of the purity of Rome. Absolutely, but it's a different aspect, right? Because they basically gave up their right to procreate. And notice this, right? What do they get? They got special privileges that no one else had, and when they gave up their right to have children, right? They didn't need to have a chaperone when they went around. They had their own lictors. I mean, they got to make their own wills. So they gained almost powers similar to those of men because they gave up the childbirth. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, isn't that interesting? So, and I think it goes back to this very binary way of seeing the sexes, right? Women do this, they take care of the home. Men go out in the world and they take care of things, right? And I think that creates a problem because like Vestal virgins kind of did some things that broke the boundaries and questioned this binary picture of gender, right? And so it was difficult to deal with in the ancient world. We're having a better time of it today.
Sorry about that. I think Jason has a question.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so you know how the Romans, when they really like something and they think it has significance, they assign a god or goddess to it, right?
Sure.
And so, yeah, why
Okay,
didn't this
okay.
happen with blood and kind of the...
That's such a great question. Oh my God, I love that. Wow, right? Like, who would be the god of blood? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I have no idea. That's really, really neat. I mean, right, you think about all the various gods ahead of the door or anything. I guess I would say that perhaps the blood is so sacred, it's almost you don't want to try to pin it down by putting a name on it in a way. But that's a really, really interesting question. Really interesting. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Not really. I mean, if we look at other cultures, there's not really a lot of blood there either. Like the only goddess I can think of is like Kali, and that's
Oh yeah.
even that's kind of tangential because she's mostly like chaotic warfare. I don't know. I don't know much about Hinduism, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking, and no, just things that involve blood, right? Like healing or war. But yeah, not blood itself. That's a really cool question. I'll have to think about that. Other questions? Comments? Let's see. Oh.
I just wanted to say thank you for this. And it's nice to see you.
Oh my gosh, Allison. Oh, it's so great to see you. How are you doing?
All right. All right. I'm glad this is still going. I'm glad that you gave this talk. And I'm glad to see you.
Oh, I'm glad to see you too. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Mowgli wanted to come, but she was engaged with Kurtaman with the 7th grade. So but
well,
and
tell
Chrissy
her I said
too.
hi. Oh wow.
I will. So good to see you.
Is it all virtual, the Kirtaman and everything? It's
Yep.
wow.
All virtual. So